Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Welcome to My World. I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly, one of the good doctors of Abbey Research, and we are empathy educators who are obsessed with culture, both lived and popped. And we use those things and the stories that we learn from them to have conversations about inclusivity and intersectionality and empathy and a whole lot of other things. In this particular series, I get the chance to spend a little bit of time with somebody different than me who has a different life experience, and I get to learn from them, and we let you guys eavesdrop. So today is a beautiful opportunity to learn from somebody who I've met very recently, and I'm completely fascinated by his life and his work, so I can't wait to hear more about it alongside you guys. So this is Beck Lee. He's a playwright, producer, and media relations advisor working in the arts. He has a passion for culture from abroad and culture from marginalized communities forced to persevere and reclaim their traditions, arts, and languages due to cultural aggression by so-called dominant cultures. We feel that way around here too. He's from New York City and continues to advocate for the arts in theater and music in New York, but is now based since 2018 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he has been promoting sustained cultural activity throughout the pandemic, including safe live assembly. Fascinating. He is launching with local partners something he calls the Cultural Fluency Initiative, which I can't wait to hear more about, a festival and conference exploring the pros and cons of group affiliation and some of the ways we can promote more tolerance and collaboration between people of different backgrounds. Well, if that doesn't just sound like Abbey Research, but with theater, I don't know what does. Beck, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. What a nice connection to make with you.
Indeed, I know. Another lovely person brought into my life by Trisha Brooks. So just what a gift. This Cultural Fluency Initiative, I love that phrase. Tell me how this came about.
Yeah, as I've been working with organizations in the arts and artists who come from different, cultural backgrounds, from different countries, from different social backgrounds. And I have had, a lot of exposure to these different projects and art forms that I have in turn been asked to sort of promote and communicate to an American audience or to the American media in many cases. And so I have this background of having sort of I'm used to the challenge of trying to translate and make it relevant, make it appealing, and make it potentially transformative even for American, so-called American or mainstream audiences to experience these things. So with that background and with having done that for many years, it's all sort of seemed to be coming together in 2017 when I came up with the idea for a client to do what we called the Immigration Arts Summit. And this idea, which I proposed to them. They were doing it was actually a theater company doing a musical about the history of Jewish immigration to America. I proposed the idea, and they said, well, we and this client was the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene, and their home was the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Lower Manhattan in the Battery. And they happened to say, we have the people that can actually coordinate something like this, and we want to do that. And it turned out that the Museum of Jewish Heritage also wanted to do this and welcome other groups that are doing, as I articulated it, the sort of the connecting sort of raison d'etre of the whole thing was cultures from abroad, organizations that present or produce culture from abroad. It happened to debut in January of 2017, just when the Muslim ban took effect. And there were protests in the Battery Park area about this, and a lot of uproar and upheaval, and this feeling of immigrants getting a bad name and being, sort of under siege. And suddenly, they needed to fight back. and they needed to really state who they are. And the word fight, of course, is inappropriate because it isn't a fight. It's more of of a gift of a
Right.
you know. So in any case, cultural fluency, to answer your question, finally came out of this, and it's this what I see happening in the world is, we're interested in multiculturalism. We're interested in the diversity issues. In we're interested in inclusion, but we don't really have the mechanisms to really understand each other and
Yes.
to really experience other cultures and people from other backgrounds. Um, so my hope with the cultural fluency initiative is that we would gain fluency in other cultures,
Mhm.
and an ease and ability to readily process, incorporate, and feel safe when learning about, experiencing, and sharing other cultures.
Yeah, and I love that. That's something we talk around about a lot around here, and how the importance of art in that process and the importance of stories in that process. Like, I mean, I took an Islam class when I was in seminary, and I read the Quran forward and backward jokingly, but like we read the Quran, we read lots of academic works about the history of the different sects, but like none of it really sunk in until we spent a couple days with imams, and they taught, and local practitioners who were like, this is what my lived experience of Islam looks like in Central Texas in like 2008, and this is how I feel in my own skin. And watching movies and reading novels always teach me more than nonfiction. That's just me.
Mhm.
um, and all of that is so much more powerful in understanding kind of the lived experience, I think, than like a tick box list you'll take a quiz over.
Yeah.
But one of the concerns I know that people that kind of have this conversation like you and I are having
Mhm.
is like not tipping into appropriation. And from my perspective, that would just mean giving like ownership of the narrative to the people that have it. Like, you are just a facilitator of the narrative. You're not writing their own story for them. Is that your perspective as well? Or do you have a different take on that?
Absolutely. Um, yeah, appropriation, exactly. You know what? We don't have to be fearful of the process of experiencing the cultural legacy, or the cultural output, or the immediate cultural experience of others.
Right.
If we're experiencing it as a fully vested participant in a process, it's not appropriation, it's sharing. It's absolutely it's not exploitive at all. As a media relations advocate, I'm really, what I'm proposing is shared experience.
Okay.
Even though tickets are being sold, even though we're there's a consumer aspect to this, the main thing is the experience and the shared experience. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
people still have to pay their mortgage, even if they're telling us their stories. So tickets need to get sold. Like, we still live in
absolutely.
capitalism. Everybody's got to eat. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and even in and even in non-traditional cultures, or should I say non-Western cultures, that have less of a consumer motivation. Cultures where art is experienced because it's traditional, because it's something that they do as a sort of a form of devotion or
Right.
compliance with their cultural, to continue that, the lineage.
Yeah.
um, those motivations are different than consumer motivations, but it's important for us to understand when those exist, and when those are more important. um, I've had the opportunity of sharing. There's a lot of interest in world music and West African drumming, for example.
There certainly is. Yeah.
Right. And most of those artists who are doing that here, in the West, uh, have to plug into this sort of concert, economic
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
But their experience of music is very different than ours, because it's all about learning traditions. It's all about communicating, or learning, a language that has been gifted down through generations. And that's something that we as Americans don't really know in our experience of the arts.
Yeah, certainly not white, Western, like European descendant Americans. That's not how I experience art at all.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
definitely, I mean, even like there's a lot of, even as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, like my faith is definitely connected to music, and is definitely connected to communal singing. That's a huge part of my faith, but not in the way that it is for a lot of non-Western Europe. Like, no, it's just not. And just a whole different ball game. But even, it's
right.
funny you say that. Like, my husband is Northern Irish and grew up on the island until he was 20, and his relationship with music is so different than mine, and his relationship
Absolutely.
with tradition and storytelling through music is so different than mine. I'm the one with formal training, but he's the one that sat at pubs and learned songs and learned protest music through songs. And that's not my experience. So it's just really, it's
Right.
fascinating. Before we can fall down this rabbit hole forever, though, I want to ask about the logistics. So, like, what does this festival or initiative look like? Is it,
Right.
is it performances? Is it workshops? Like, how are you making this happen?
Well, to answer this question, I'm going to have to be somewhat prophetic, because it's something that is happening, hopefully for the first time in this late fall or winter here in the Twin Cities. And it's very much in development.
Right.
But it's hopefully going to coincide with a sort of a further opening of live assembly after the pandemic, or not after necessarily. Nobody can predict when this will end, but as conditions allow.
Right.
And I think that a lot of cities are hoping to have more live assembly. And but here's the thing with the Cultural Fluency Initiative, as we're conceiving it and developing it at this point with the partners that I have, we expect it to be a mix of live and virtual
Oh, okay.
programming. Because we have found, it's been my experience that some of the most amazing things that are happening as we sort of adjust to the circumstances in the arts and communication is this incredible, explosion of virtual experiences that we're using to sort of make up for the loss of the in-person experience.
Is there any fear on behalf of your partners that some of the, inherent empathy that is built in presence of people is going to break down over virtual? Is that a conversation?
Will it break down? In other
Yeah, like
words,
I just think sometimes when you're in a space with somebody, it's easier to dial in than when you're virtually connected. Is there especially with people maybe sharing more emotional parts of their culture, or the music you were talking about already that is connected to ancestral
mhm,
relationship rather than commercial performance? Is there
mhm.
is there a fear around that, or am I just overreaching?
No, I think it's a legitimate concern, and I would ask. I think asking the question is important because we don't know. But I think what I think is my feeling is that art and communication are inherently adaptive,
Mm,
and inherently that connection, the ultimate connection is so important that we make it however we can.
yeah, we got
And
to muddle through somehow, because not doing it is not an option.
that's not an option,
Yeah.
right? So we will do it. And just as you and I are having a very, very nice and intimate conversation virtually from two different cities,
Mhm.
and doing something that and exploring a topic, in some depth. Um, this is something that I think was not happening with this kind of frequency, over a year ago. So,
No.
you
No, I
know,
mean, I'm a huge live theater fan. Live theater is something that is very life-giving to me.
mhm,
And that's been a real grief. I'm not in it professionally,
mhm.
but it's been a real grief over the last year that I haven't been able to experience art that way, that I've had to experience it entirely through screens. But I think one of the lessons that we've all learned from the pandemic is that those of us who are not part of it professionally as you are, but who rely on it a lot for our emotional development
Mhm.
or our self-care or just joy, full stop, is like the option of live experiences not coming back is not on the table. Like, we are
Yeah,
going to figure this out somehow,
yeah,
because live performance is essential to the human experience.
yeah,
And
yeah,
all of the narratives about the arts being subsidiary, to me, I hope we have so much more evidence now about how crazy that is, because they
yeah.
are central to the human experience.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I had a live theater bias myself, and I was very resentful of what was happening to theater companies, and that were just shutting down because they, and I would say a year ago in the spring, I was sort of beating the drum of, well, the theaters that don't have fixed seating should be trying to come up with ways, new modalities, new performance modalities, and many did. And that it was that fixed seating problem that basically a lot of these theater companies and music venues were facing. And I had the bias. I was saying, so then let's go outside. Let's continue to um, uh, stubbornly demand of ourselves that we see people outdoors, and that we see people in actual, face to face, dynamic, and that we see art, you know in a live setting. I still have that, I still have a lot of that, but I also feel that, again, because people have been so adaptive,
Yeah.
that impulse to connect is sort of manifesting itself in different ways, and will actually, the palette will widen of experiences.
Yeah, I hope so. Because the other piece of this is, when we talk about cultural experiences, is the democratization of live theater. Like, there is just so many populations that can't access it in various reasons and various ways. And I think about it every single time I go to a theater built before 1980, is the number of my friends in wheelchairs or with crutches that could not get to certain places in the theater. And how do we tell stories around that are different? Like, how do we do that? And so I hope that like, I'll say this, the Ivory Tower is terrible about holding conferences where you have to be in the room, and they won't
Mhm.
share it virtually. And we've all of a sudden, my business partner and I are watching academics be like, oh, we could just set up a Zoom camera. We're like, yeah, it's not that hard. Like, just set up a Zoom camera,
Yeah,
because I can't afford to fly to Moscow, but that I really want to hear that paper.
yeah.
I think there's pieces of theater that are coming. I mean, there's a magic to be in person. But I remember I was having this conversation when Hamilton dropped on Disney Plus,
Hmm.
and there were all these people that were like, oh, it's going to ruin Hamilton. I was like, pals, I've watched taped musical theater, and I have seen the exact same cast in person. And I'm telling you right now, those are wildly different
Yeah,
experiences. Like,
yeah,
I'm so thrilled that so many people got to experience Hamilton, or
yeah,
one of my other favorite musicals is Newsies, and they've
yeah.
had that filmed forever. And I
Wow.
love I used it to teach labor rights when I was teaching,
Yeah,
in college. It was wonderful. But
right.
like, being in a theater is a different ballgame.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah, yeah, and I have this optimism and overall optimism about it. Probably because my whole experience has been leavened by the fact that while I'm in Minnesota, here in Minneapolis, I have been involved since the middle of the pandemic, or towards the beginning of the pandemic, with an organization that has been doing live assembly.
Right.
This concert venue, or it's a supper club in a little
I love supper clubs.
on a lake, with a lot of outdoor space, and it's just it's on the northern border of Minneapolis. The Twin Cities has an incredible music scene, but this
Yeah, they
place,
do.
the owner said, we have the space. Let's figure out ways to do concerts outdoors and do it safely.
Yeah.
And so I've been involved with this wonderful place called Crooner's Supper Club. And from June 1st till November 19th of last year, they presented 247 ticketed outdoor concerts. It was probably the most in the United States.
Yeah,
Yes,
I haven't heard anybody in that high numbers. That's amazing.
no, it's an incredible achievement. They created 4 unique venues outdoors, and it was my job to sort of promote this to the media in town here, and I faced some resistance from some media outlets that had just sort of like basically said, the rules are this, and we cannot do this, and it's not possible anymore, and we have to hunker down, and we have to. So their narrative, the media narrative, was not being served by our narrative, or it was being somewhat, we were deviating from their narrative. So there were a few media outlets that kind of wanted to overlook what was going on over there because it didn't
It
fully
didn't
fall
tell the
into.
story that they were telling. Yeah.
Yeah, which was basically, this is serious, and there are people who are not taking it seriously, deniers and whatnot, and we have a responsibility to ourselves and to the community that we belong
Right.
to adhere to strict lockdown, or other COVID related prescriptive behavior.
Well, obviously, then this is so you've had great training in how to do it under more significant restrictions.
Hmm.
And now, as Minneapolis and the rest of the world and the rest of the country moves into a different phase of this thing, I know I can't wait to hear what comes from the initiative. And you've given us a bunch of links that I will make sure in the show notes here so that folks can follow up. And then I hope once it's all said and done, round 1 of this Fluency initiative, I hope you'll come back and update us on it.
That would be great. I'd love to do that.
I can't wait. Well, Beck, thanks again for joining us. And everyone, I will see you next time on Welcome to My World.